Passed pawns, a very dangerous creature on the chessboard. You must have experienced this thing in your games also, as it is very rightly said by the famous author Aaron Nimzowitsch that passed pawns are like the criminals which should be kept under lock and key. And the third world chess champion Capablanca was also of the opinion that passed pawn's strength increases when the number of pieces on the board decreases. And that's why we are going to see the strength of the passed pawn in the following game. We are going to look at a game played by a very famous world chess champion, Robert James Fischer. Yes, the boy from Brooklyn is going to demonstrate that what happens when you get a passed pawn, and in that process in order to queen the pawn, he keeps on exchanging his opponent's blockaders, and in doing that thing his opponent is busy in defending his position, and slowly and gradually when the pieces start diminishing from the board, the strength of the passed pawn increases, and then in the end he queens the passed pawn and wins the game. So guys, I am Atul Dahale presenting you this beautiful game for you. In this game, Robert James Fischer, or you can say the Bobby Fischer, is white. His opponent Berliner Jack is black. The game was played in USA Championship in 1960 in New York. So the game starts with e4. Here black plays knight f6. It is called as the Alekhine game, guys. White plays e5, going forward with the pawn. Knight comes on d4, d5 square. Now d4 is played, d6. Obviously we need to attack in the center of the board because we cannot really give up the center just like that. Okay, that's the usual plan. Now c4 is played, attacking the knight over here on d5. Knight goes to b6 square, and now he captures on d6. C captures d6. Obviously queen d6 is also one of the moves in this position, but c d6 is also a possibility. Knight c3, knight comes into center. Now what to do about this bishop? So that's why he plays g6 in order to play bishop g7 at some point and then going for the castle. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so white develops a piece by playing bishop d3, bishop g7, a new piece is developed. Now we are in dilemma whether to play the knight on f3 or knight e2. Well, here Fischer decided to put it on e2 square because let's suppose you put it on f3, which is a possibility in this position. Black might play something like bishop g4 and pin the knight, and then again we need to take care of the pawn on d4, which I think like he doesn't want to do. Okay, so that's why he plays knight to e2, supporting the pawn on d4. And even if you play bishop g4 in this position, we can simply kick away the bishop with f3 move. Okay, so he plays knight c3, putting more pressure on d4 square. Now he plays bishop e3, supporting the pawn over here by 2 pieces. Black was also attacking with 2 pieces. Fair enough. Black castles in this position, safeguard the king. White also castles in this position. And now finally in this position, black decides to play the pawn move in the center with e5 move. Well, there are two options in this position from white side. One is like we can capture the pawn with d into e5, and the other one is like you can keep the center closed by playing d5 move. Which was the choice of Fischer? Well, why is he doing that thing? Usually when you play d5, you weaken the square, that is c5 square. But as you can see, there is no knight on d7 which will be jumping on c5 square. Well, maybe in the future the knight will be coming on c5 square, but we will see what Fischer does for those things. Okay, so knight goes to e7 square, and now it's time to protect the pawn on c4. So he plays b3. Knight goes to d7. As I already mentioned, the knight should be coming on c5 square because it is now the hole in the position. So Fischer simply plays knight to e4, controlling the c5 square. Now he is discouraging his opponent to play knight c5, because if you play that move, obviously you will lose the pawn by after this capture, and white will be just pawn up. Plus he has a passed pawn in the center which is connected, and he should win the game. Okay, so here the moves like f5 are also not so good because the knight on e4 is actually attacking the pawn on d6, and Fischer will be very happy to capture the pawn on d6. So he plays knight f5, supporting the pawn on d6 square. Okay, so he plays now the bishop on e3 is being attacked by the knight, so he needs to do something about it. We are not going to just give up the bishop pair for our opponent, so he plays bishop to g5. One more thing I would like to tell you, that in this position the pawns are on the light square, so it makes more sense for us to protect the bishop on dark square. Okay, if it's necessary for you, you need to exchange that bishop, you will do that thing. But if it's possible for you to keep that bishop, or you can say the retain that bishop on the board, then you should definitely do that thing. Okay, a rule should be remembered. Okay, so now he plays bishop to g5. Now here he plays f6. Well, f6 is played. Instead of this move, there are other possibilities also. For example, if you play queen c7, which looks quite okay, just supporting the pawn on d6, and it feels that nothing is going to happen. But actually white has a very interesting idea, that is to play g4, kicking away this knight on f5, because this knight is not only controlling the d6 square but also the e7 square. And if knight doesn't have that many good squares, maybe he will play knight d4, then we can capture, and bishop will land on e7 square, attacking the f8 as well as d6. If rook e8 is played, then white will be pawn up, plus the pawn on d5 is a passed pawn, connected passed pawn, and white should be on top. Okay, so obviously he did not play queen c7. Here he goes for f6, attacking the bishop. Now what to do? Well, he did not play bishop g5 just for like that. He played bishop g5 because he wanted to provoke f6 move. And now he goes behind on d2 square, because obviously bishop e3 means knight will capture and black will just play f5 at some point and he should be fine. So knight comes on c5 square. Here Fischer exchanges the knight, and after d into c5, finally he gets the pawn, which is a passed pawn here. There is no pawn in front of this pawn, that means it is a passed pawn. And there are only 3 squares for the pawn to reach the queening square, and the pawn will be blessed, you can say. In that case, now what to do? First of all, understand, whenever you get a passed pawn, you need to see that which are the defenders from your opponent's side. We can even call them the blockaders, because it is said that the knight is the best blockader on the chessboard. And if the knight lands on this d6 square, then the knight will be controlling this pawn, it will not move forward. Plus, the knight will be attacking all these squares, and f5 and e4, black will be on top. So what to do? You need to defend, means you need to remove the defenders, or you can say remove the blockaders from the board. So first of all, Fischer plays bishop into f5, removing the important blockader. Bishop captures here, and now he plays f4 because he needs to open up the position, correct? So f4 is played, he captures f4, the knight captures on f4, queen comes on d6, blockading the pawn on d5. Okay, just pay attention to these things. Okay, now here he plays a very interesting move. He goes for knight h5. Obviously a very interesting idea, because if he capture here, then rook into f5 will be played, then the pawn on h5 will fall, plus the bishop on g7 is very badly placed. Okay, so here he plays rook a e8, and now the knight on h5 captures the bishop on g7. Fischer is actually exchanging pieces after pieces. Why is he doing that? Well, he has a plan of action. As I said earlier, the more number of pieces you exchange on the board, the strength of the passed pawn increases, and that's what he is doing. He's not afraid of going into the opposite color bishop endgame, which might be a drawn endgame, because he believes in the strength of the passed pawn here. So his opponent plays king into g7. Now bishop f4 comes. The blockader on d6 is going to move somewhere. And I want to tell you one thing, that queen is the worst blockader on the board. You should never try to blockade the pawn with the queen. Okay, so now queen d2. Obviously the idea is to just play this move and capture the rook on f8. So he plays rook f7, bishop h6 check comes here in this position, king goes behind, and now it's time to bring the rook in the game. So his opponent plays rook f e7, he happily exchanges the pieces. Okay, queen e7 is what was played, rook into e7 was also a possibility, and the game will go on. Okay, but he plays queen into e7, and now he plays h3. Obviously this bishop is the main blockader here. We need to have some counterplay in this position, so he plays h3 with the idea of playing g4 in future. Here black plays queen e4, trying to get some play. He plays queen f2, safeguarding everything and attacking the pawn on c5. Okay, now the queen goes behind on e7 square, supporting this pawn, but as you can see, the queen and the rook are in the same line and the pawn on f6 is under attack. So he plays g4. Here black needs to do something interesting, because if he plays something like bishop d6, d7, then white will be more than happy to just capture the pawn, and he should be on top. So he plays bishop d3, attacking the rook on f1. We don't have any time to capture on this square, that is f6. So he plays rook d1, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes to this square, and now finally it's time to push the pawn forward. So here Fischer plays d6. The queen is being attacked. Queen goes to e5 square. Well, if you try to defend the position, then you will lose the pawn on c5 as well as on f6. Whichever you want to capture, you can capture, and black should be in trouble. Okay, so he plays queen e5, being in the support of the f6 pawn. He again pushes the pawn forward with d7. Well, that was a possibility, but if you push the pawn, then I think there is a possibility of rook d8, and the pawn will be a little bit guarded. So he plays a very interesting idea. First of all, he plays bishop f4, attacking the queen over here. queen goes to c3 square. Now it is no longer near the pawn, okay, and now it's the right time for Fischer to push the pawn. So patience is the key, guys. So he plays d7 pawn, rook d8 comes, and now what to do? Well, now you can see the rook on d8 is the main blockader. It can means we can play bishop c7 and attack the rook on d8, but in that case there will be some possibilities like queen into h3, queen h1, and white's king will be a little bit in trouble. So first of all he plays queen e2, attacking the bishop over here. If the bishop moves anywhere, let's suppose you play bishop f3 in this position, then white has a very nice move, that is queen e8 check. And if you capture, obviously white will be getting the queen, followed by it's going to be a check and mate very soon. So you cannot really capture if you play this move. Then also I think like we can first give a check, king will come here, and then followed by we can take the rook, and white should be winning in that case. So he doesn't have any chance to play the bishop. So he plays queen f3, thinking that okay, he might get a chance because after the exchanges the bishop will be attacking on d1. But Fischer has seen something very interesting. He goes for the next move, that is bishop c7, because even if you capture the rook on d1, Fischer can capture on d8, and the bishop is too much far away. Well, you can play king f7, thinking that okay, you will be getting king e7, king e6, and the pawn on d7 will be falling. But white has a very nice simple idea, that is bishop into f6 is there. If he captures, then we'll just push the pawn and the pawn will be queening. Or you have another option also, just play bishop c7 followed by pawn will be queening, and that's how in this position, Fischer's opponent decided to resign the game. Okay, so this was a very beautiful demonstration of the strength of the pawn. Slowly and gradually Fischer exchanged opponent's pieces, the blockaders are gone from the board, and he won the game in a very nice and simple style. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like this video, share this video with your friends also, and if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, guys. We'll be meeting very soon with something interesting topic or a very interesting video, guys. Till that moment, take care, goodbye, and love you all.